Okay, the recording started. Can I welcome you to the Cabinet meeting on Monday the 22nd of March 2021, obviously a remote meeting. Are there any apologies for absence? I think looking around there are none. The next item is the minutes of the Cabinet meeting of the 8th of March. Only one comment I would make is under C513. I made a comment about a deferral and somebody who made the complaint, well, made the issue, brought the issue to our attention, said it wasn't a matter that was needed clarification, but I actually thought it was a comment when in fact it was probably an objection. So just to put the record straight, I accept it was an objection, but we will deal with that in a report which comes to us later. Okay, can I have, excuse me, can I have everybody's acceptance of the minutes, please?
Yeah, I'll formally second, Peter.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest, please? None. Okay, good. In that case, I will go on to references. But before I do, I normally make some comment about the pandemic, and just simply a simple comment that the pandemic is still with us. I would make a plea to anyone who has been invited for a vaccination to turn up, because I know that there have been some examples lately that people have been no-shows, so to speak. And I think it's important that we get as many people vaccinated as possible. Maybe the issue was because of some of the publicity from Europe, but clearly that's now been dealt with, and I hope that everybody will be vaccinated in the schedule that goes forward. And if you've missed one, please phone your GP and try and organise another one. I'll say no more than that. Okay, if we go to references, the first one is the flooding event, and it's a reference from the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee of the 16th of February. It relates to the flooding event on the 23rd of December. Peter, are you going to take this one? There were some comments made in the reference, but mostly to do with cleaning of drains, I guess, more than anything else.
Yes, Leader. Thanks ever so much. I think it's. I think for those of us who attended the
locked? Am I locked, or is everybody else locked?
I think I'm all right.
I think it's just you.
We're okay.
Neil.
Sorry. Am I muted, or am I working?
Oh, you're okay. Working.
I was just saying, for those of us who were able to attend the scrutiny meeting will know that it was a very robust scrutiny. And wide-ranging with significant contributions from a number of people. I think we all learnt something that night, because it gave the members of the public who'd been affected a chance to contribute and share some of their experiences. And I think one of the things we've got to remember is that you cannot overestimate the anxiety and distress that such flooding causes, and we have done a great deal of work since and continue to do that. But anyway, we come to their recommendations. They do make some recommendations. I'm just frantically scrolling down to find them on my copy. They're asking us to look at our council drain cleaning schedule. All I would say is that we will certainly reflect upon that, but I do ask that we delay until we have a sight of the Section 19 report, because I think we want to be informed by the fullest of pictures before we start doing, or at least to guide us over that work. But there will be, no doubt, I'll be bringing that report very, very soon. It's due imminently. Thank you. And I suppose the important thing is then with that, I recommend that we note and accept their report.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. They make excuse me, comments in relation to drain cleaning, and clearly that's an issue we have to look at maybe, but let's wait for the Section 19 report first. So we'll note the comments and await the other report. Yeah, is that okay? So agreed. The next item is a reference from the Audit Committee of the 1st of March, and it's in relation to the Reshaping Services Programme and the review of it. The report findings from Audit Wales were actually generally positive. The reshaping. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, that's my watch going off. As I said, the findings were generally positive. The Reshaping Services Programme was effectively managed and had helped deliver savings. That was clear, and I think we've all realised that in the past. But we also know there's an opportunity to refocus the programme and strengthen the workforce planning to support its delivery. The audit report came up with 5 proposals, which are appended to the report before you, numbered P1 to P5. There was a question about whether the timescales, how long it would take to do that, but clearly it was reported at that meeting that further actions will be considered by Cabinet and taken forward, but most of the actions actually have been substantially completed. So any new actions would have to be looked at and how the programme could be developed further, and these would come into effect over the next few months, and as I said, they'll be subject to the Cabinet reports. There was a question about whether or not we would use internal or external specialists, and clearly we would use both, depending on the situation itself. We are an active member of the continuous improvement community, and we make good use of that network. So basically, the Cabinet, the Audit Committee noted the report and referred it on to us for endorsement of the proposed actions within the improvement, which, as I say, are those actions P1 to P5. So to be honest, I think we should note their comments, thank them for the comments they've made, and clearly look forward to further reports coming to Cabinet in relation to the Reshaping Service Programme, and move forward from there, and clearly work with Audit in order to achieve the results. And I don't know if anybody's got any comments, so can I just simply note it and await further reports to Cabinet on indeed the Reshaping Service Programme. Is that agreed?
And I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. Next item also came from the Audit Committee on the 1st of March. A considerable report because it's the Corporate Risk Register for Q3. As I said, the report itself is an overview of the Corporate Risk Register. A risk analysis was incorporated within the Corporate Risk Summary, which is at Appendix A to the report, which I say is quite substantial, and it identified and assessed the trends and the cross-cutting nature of the risks, and therefore gives us the ability to drill down into the details of the risk when required. The Audit Committee recommended that we note the corporate risks and the emerging issues, and they asked the Cabinet to consider and endorse the items within it. There were some questions asked in relation to things like the 5-year workforce plan as opposed to a longer one, but clearly we have to arrange that in terms of the Reshaping Services also has to bear consideration of the other things that we go forward, like the corporate plan, etc. So the committee agreed as part of the next risk register update would be their issues would be affecting the additional learning needs, and they will include it in the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on all those learners with Welsh as their first language, and that could be considered in greater detail. So basically what they did, they resolved to note Appendix A, that they asked for comments would come to us. Well, I think the report speaks for itself. There weren't anything of any great thing that they needed us to address, but clearly the risks are there and they're contained within the report itself. And in relation to the third part of their recommendation, that the implications of the new legislation learning needs be explored, in further detail by the Audit Committee, and indeed I would expect those to be explored and reported back to this committee, to this cabinet. So basically, Audit Committee looked at the corporate risk register. We're happy with the situation as it is, albeit there were emerging issues, and there will always be emerging issues, and clearly COVID-19 has had a major impact in terms of that. So can I formally move that we note the comments and look forward to any comments in relation to additional learning needs report in the future. Is that accepted?
I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. Next item again is from the Audit Committee of the 1st of March. That was a review of the outsourced leisure services. And again, the overall report findings concluded that the Council was receiving an income from the leisure contract, but needed to assure itself that the contract was providing value for money and strengthen its applications of this sustainable development principle when it extended the contract. I don't know, Karen, sorry, excuse me, I got my tongue in my throat. Catherine, you want to come in at this stage? I'll take a drink at this stage.
Certainly, Leader, yes. Yeah, it was a report obviously done by the Audit Committee in relation to our leisure provision. I think initially we'd maybe looked at it and been a bit upset about how we'd read it, but actually it's a really positive report. And the Audit Committee said the audit, National Audit for Wales, they didn't mean it in that way. So from an audit point of view, in our Audit Committee, it was received well. So it's given us some interesting points to move forward and points that we were dealing with already. So very glad that it's come back through Cabinet today.
Yeah, it's good because it also talked about the MIG recommendations about relevant council officers and members training on the 5 ways of working, which would be good. I know they addressed some of the issues in relation to single-sex swimming sessions or sessions in the leisure centre, which had been addressed anyway. But clearly, there's also the duties in relation to the Equalities Act, which we obviously are very conscious about and encourage those communities to provide the opportunities as far as possible. But as I said, all in all, it's a positive report, and in fact, we are still receiving income from the contract. Clearly, we need to look at the way it goes forward, but all in all, I think it's a positive report. And basically, they noted the report and endorsed the actions addressed and the improvements that are going forward. So that's good. Happy with that. We note the contents and look forward if there's any comments coming forward. Changes need to be, then we'll obviously receive them. Okay, next item is item 8, which is the Joint Consultative Forum, which is the minutes held on the 22nd of February. They are before you. One of the interesting points within it, as far as I can see when I read it, was the issue of lone working devices. But clearly that was addressed in terms of health and safety wellbeing manager working with their team to encourage people to make sure they use the facilities. One of the points it made was that some of the issues in terms of things like the Solo Protect project that would be used in some areas but not in everywhere. But indeed, the other point was that we're still talking about people, if they're working remotely, making sure that they can use other systems. And I think you can use things on your telephone. It can be tracked where you are. More to the point, you phone in the morning and you phone in before you go an appointment, and you phone in after an appointment, and you phone in at the end of the day. So everybody knows exactly the staff are safe. That was the main thing that, to be honest, I highlighted from that. And I'm glad to see that it was raised in the JCF. I don't know if anybody else got any comments, because all the rest of it were really noted. There was obviously a presentation on climate change, which is important, and again, it's forms part of a report coming to this committee today too. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm pleased that the issue in terms of lone working has been raised. Apart from that, I think we just note the report, unless anybody's got any comments, please.
Just formally secondly.
No. In that case, I will move forward. And as I said, moving forward to climate change, this is Project Zero, the draft climate change challenge plan, and this is here to seek approval to consult on the draft climate challenge plan. The draft does detail 18 challenges and the steps the Council proposed to take to meet those challenges as part of Project Zero. They're framed around the needs and demonstrate strong leadership, fulfill our responsibilities to the current and future generations, and to make a difference now. The plan also details some of the work already undertaken. It also sets details of the consultation of the draft, which will take place between the 23rd of March to the 11th of May. And the report also sets out the timetables for the plan being approved post-consultation and the proposed governance arrangements for Project Zero, including scrutiny. The items are contained within the report itself. This is a draft. It is going to consultation. So basically, the recommendations have been asked is the Cabinet approves the draft Climate Change Challenge Plan as the basis for undertaking consultation as described in the report. The Cabinet approves the consultation programme and timetable. The Cabinet refers the report to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee and the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for views as part of their views on the draft plan as part of the consultation process, but also that we refer it to the Community Liaison Committee and the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committees for their views, again, as part of the consultation process. The Project Zero and draft climate change is attached to Appendix A, and you can see in the report, it talks about key considerations, talks about the challenges on page 5 and the 3 main areas which are covered in that. Talks about the proposed timetable at 218, paragraph 218, and again it talks about climate change challenge plan timetable at 225. It is quite clear, it is a draft, it is out for consultation, we've been asked to approve it and send it for consultation. Liz, do you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Leader. Apart from formally seconding the recommendations, I would like to put on record that this is a super piece of work. Quite a while ago, COVID allowing, we declared a climate emergency, and we said that not only would we be working to put our own house in order, but we would be working with others, we would be lobbying others to have the impact of achieving net zero by 2030. The work that we've already done is impressive, but I think that what this report lays out is the work that we still have to do is challenging in the extreme. I really will look forward to hearing what is said at scrutiny. I think we should make it obvious that members of the public can they can register to speak at scrutiny as well as contributing to the overall consultation. But I will very much look forward to what comes back to us in the fullness of time.
Yep, and indeed it'll be on our website, and anybody else can contribute to, and we can have a report back on that. Okay, does anybody else want to make any comments? And I know I don't know if anybody else is, but my Wi-Fi is playing up today, I'm afraid. Kind of dipping in and out. Rob, I think the Managing Director would like to come in. Rob.
Yeah, can I just echo those comments, Leader, please? I know a considerable amount of work has gone into this this report, not just the report itself to bring it here today, but behind the scenes, a lot of work on the actual strategy itself. What matters now is how we engage on this issue going forward. The Deputy Leader mentioned that it's down to us as in our role as a community leader, but also in terms of how we can influence others, and that's going to be of considerable importance moving forward if we are going to make a difference on this agenda, which is a really pressing agenda. I know we've consulted with the Public Service Board already, but we now need to take that out to the wider community and to take it forward and to make a difference. So it'll be good to get this work underway.
Thank you, Rob. It would, and indeed, as I said, the timetable is laid out there so that it will be coming back to Cabinet in July and go on to Council on the 26th of July. So hopefully we can get some real consultation in terms of this. And if people have got anything to put forward, then we really do want to hear from them. It's as simple as that. Okay, so we agree the recommendations and they go forward for consultation. Okay, thank you very much. The next item is arrangements for the commencement of the socio-economic duty. This report brings the attention of the Cabinet's Council's arrangements for meeting the requirements of the Welsh Government's commencement of the socio-economic duty on the 31st of March. The Welsh Government did issue interim guidance in April, 1st of April 2020. And will issue statutory guidance on the 31st of March 2021. When the duty commences, if a relevant body fails to perform a duty, an individual or group whose interests are adversely affected by that public body decision may be able to bring a judicial review claim against that authority. The Council has amended its equality impact assessment process to facilitate consideration of the socio-economic duty and will further review this following the issue of a statutory guidance. What Council has been asked to do is to note the contents of the report. The Cabinet approved the amended equality impact assessment at Appendix A, and the Cabinet notes the briefing note designed to raise awareness of socio-economic duty at Appendix B. Liz, can you take over for a second, please?
I can do. I shall just get the report up onto my proper screen. Hang on. It's all right. I'm just trying to juggle. For some strange reason, I can't find it at the moment. Let me come up to. Sorry about this, people.
I apologise. Somebody called to the door to tell me double glazing. Believe it or not.
No, sorry. I was trying to find it, and for some reason I was stuck on the references.
Basically, what's happened with it? Equalities Act 2010 actually includes the socio-economic duty, but for some reason it's just lay dormant when the Act came into force. So the Wales Act 2017 devolved powers to the Welsh ministers to commence it, and in fact that's what they've now done, and they're commencing the duty from the 31st of March. It does build on things like things achieved through the Equalities Act 2020 and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. And I know that both commissioners have jointly prepared a statement called A More Equal Wales Mapping the Duties, and then that's referenced in the report, and I think there's a hyperlink to it if you go online. And that's really, I guess, to help public bodies apply for the socio-economic, the public sector equality and well-being of future generation duties and make sure that they're properly aligned. As I said, the report gives an overview of the duty itself, and it's contained within the report. And I don't really want to read it all because you can read it for yourself. But the important part about this is the amended equality impact assessment form, which is attached for information at Appendix A, because the important part about that is we are amending it, and it's also the other issue in terms of it. It is a live document, which we can and will develop further to reflect the statutory guidance when it's introduced on the 31st of March 2021. So in some respects, it's a bit of a holding report saying this is what's coming, this is what we think is going to be in it. We're amending it, the impact assessment now, but clearly if something different comes forward from the guidance, which is yet to come, we can obviously deal with it. So, as I said, the recommendations are there. I think maybe we should make a further recommendation on reflection, is that we give delegated authority to the managing director to amend the equalities impact assessment when necessary and report back if there are any necessary changes. I think that might be, as I said, apologize for leaving. For the problems of working from home. Liz, do you want to come in any further? Sorry.
Yes, I was just going to comment, apart from formally seconding the recommendations, to say I think as a council we have been working along these lines for quite a while, but I think it's good that it's been formalised and it will play part of our considerations. We have reports where we consider the impact of deprivation among children who are in our schools. We know that children who are eligible for free school meals normally don't achieve as well as children who aren't eligible. We know, we've heard within the review undertaken by Public Services Board that some of our most disadvantaged communities have a healthy life expectancy 23 years less than other communities in the Vale, and I think that most of us faced with that sort of information are deeply concerned. So I think it's completely right that this should come to the front of the agenda now and be considered as part of the equality impact assessment, so that those sorts of inequalities are at the forefront of our thinking going forward.
Good, I agree. And just to highlight, Appendix B obviously is the briefing on the commencement of the duty, and that's a comprehensive document, and it gives you hyperlinks to other guidance and documents too. So I think it's an important thing. We're ahead of the game in some respects, and await the guidance on the 31st. So can I move those recommendations? Plus the added one is that we give delegated authority to the managing director in consultation with myself in order to make any amendments as necessary as a result of the guidance coming out, and they will then can be reported back to Cabinet at a further time. Can I ask the monitoring officer, are you happy with that? Please.
Yes, perfectly happy with that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I think it gives a delegation, but also gives a consultation. So, can I? I formally moved it, formally seconded, so I will move on. Okay. Next item is the review of statues, monuments, street names and building names. And this is a review of the panel terms of reference. If you recall, in January 2021, Cabinet approved the terms of reference for the review panel to assist in the review of the statues, monuments, street names and building names in the Vale of Glamorgan in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, as previously requested at Cabinet in November 2020. The panel has met for the first time and has proposed that the Cabinet consider making changes to the terms of reference to change the membership, so that it would enhance the inclusivity and independence of the panel, including to include other political groups, and to consider whether a standing representative from a history society should be included, or specific advice sought from individual experts on individual matters. If you recall, originally the panel was set up and it was first brought together fairly recently. The report that is here now sets out suggested changes at Appendix A, and that considers a further review. But basically, the panel was composed of myself, the deputy leader, the champion for equalities, and which are the other one, from the local group, and the LGBT champion too. But they felt that they needed more parity, more independence. So basically what they're asking for is that the panels increased to include, extending the panel's membership to include one representative from each of the council's political groups. They also suggested removal of the standing member of the panel from the local history society, with expertise called upon from the relevant societies, academia and other organisations on specific issues as they arose. And indeed they could pick up from history societies in the local area where they're discussing the issue. What happens then is that the panel is therefore proposed extending it to include, as I say, one representative from the group. on reflection, it clearly is something which is going to have to come back to Cabinet. And if it comes back to Cabinet, then it's probably wrong that myself and the Deputy Leader are members of that panel, because clearly that could cause not some independence, and in fact it could cause some issues because you are reporting back on yourself in some respects. So the considerations, and in light of the desire to review the panel, to be inclusive, to be representative and independent as possible, we're suggesting the removal of myself, Leader, and Deputy Leader from the panel's membership. As I said, it's felt inappropriate that we would be members of the panel and then make recommendations back to the Cabinet, which we currently lead. So it could cause some issues, therefore, I think, and therefore you could argue that we wouldn't be independent, or the Cabinet wouldn't be independent, unbiased and influenced, etc. So basically what we're suggesting is that the panel continues to have the local members, local, I can't think what they're called, sorry, for I can't think what they're called, help me somebody. From the,
it's the equality champion and the LGBT champion.
No, the group.
The Stand Up to Racism. Stand Up to Racism.
I can't think what it's called. Sorry, for Barry in particular. So we're recommending that, but also that we're also recommending that the chairman of the appeal panel be agreed by the members of the review panel at their first meeting by way of a simple majority vote. But if you look in 2.9, what we're also talking about is that chairperson should be a councillor. And I think they have to be a councillor on the basis that it's a council committee, and therefore it's logical that any elected member could be the chairman of the committee. So what we're recommending is changes so that Liz and I drop out. There are increased membership from a member from each of the political groups, as well as those already on it. And it's recommended that this actually also is referred back to Scrutiny, Learning and Culture to provide a further update on the work in progress in this area. But I would remind you that when we agreed this originally, we felt it would try to keep it tight. It went to Scrutiny. Scrutiny agreed it, but clearly the panel feels it needs to have a broader, more independent, unbiased, and uninfluenced style to report back to us to make the final considerations. So I think it probably works better, and I didn't do that very well. And I apologise. Liz, do you want to come in?
Yes, Leader. I mean, apart from to formally second, I will say that it was on reflection. I think that we wanted this panel to be fleet of foot. We recommended that any sort of decisions went to scrutiny to make sure that they were fully considered, and that was cross-party and also had people from the wider community in it. But it was when we had that first meeting that we felt that there was it felt wrong to be reporting back on our own discussions. So to have that one degree of separation would probably improve the discussions of that group and the outcomes of that group. So I said happy to support and to formally second the recommendations.
Okay, Eddie.
Yeah, I fully support, and I think just for the benefits of members and the public, this has taken considerable time and effort, isn't it, to try and resolve this. Just getting the terms of reference sorted out so that we can come up with proposals which will suit the residents of the Vale, and a recognition that, you know, with the additional, I would argue that the political parties in there is important, because that it shows that it isn't biased in one particular area, and also recognising that you want these discussions to take a reasonable amount of time. And clearly, with the situation we're in at the moment, yourselves are already busy, and you wouldn't want to not pay sufficient, sufficient towards this, to make sure that the decisions that we're going to come up with are in line with what the Vale residents want. So very, very well supported, and also the fact it's going to scrutinies. And also the fact that you've got a council representing it's important, that's got to be recognised, because often sometimes the an outsider doesn't quite know the workings of council business, and that will enable the contact, the communication within to be much more clearer. So it's not that they're not any better or worse at communicating. It's just that it's the mechanism of the way we do business, and if we, as a council, we're going to take responsibility for it, then it needs to be though. So fully support the report that's come here today.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I think it's important that the chair is an elected member, because it is a panel of the council. So if we're all in agreement, then we will set that up again. But clearly, it'll go back to scrutiny committee for further consideration if they so wish. And obviously, this will also ask our democratic services to contact each of the leaders of the groups to submit a representative to the group itself. So if that's agreed, I think I read out the recommendations. I didn't, but I will. It's recommended that the Cabinet note the contents of the report. It's recommended the Cabinet consider and endorse the revised terms of reference for the review panel as described in this report and at Appendix A. It's recommended that, subject to recommendation 2, Democratic Services contact the leaders of the Council's political groups to request one nomination each to join the review panel. It's recommended that this report is referred to Scrutiny Committee, Learning and Culture for the consideration and to provide a further update on the work of the review. So just to be formal and frank, they are the recommendations, so I formally move. Okay, and I apologise for my my throat and the intervention of my doorbell earlier on, which put me off, but there you are. Then the next report is an update on the proposals to increase the number of primary school places in Cowbridge to meet the increased demand as a result of the recent and proposed housing developments. I think this is down to Liz as a deputy leader.
Thank you, Leader, and I'll try and be a little bit more adept at juggling 2 computers than I was last time. The purpose of this report is to advise Cabinet of the outcome of the statutory notice published on the proposal to increase the number of primary school places in Cowbridge and seek final determination. But with Cabinet's indulgence, I'd like to sort of rewind a little bit in terms of how we've got to this position so that we can understand the recommendations going forward. This takes us right back to November 2019, when we approved a phased approach to expanding primary provision in Cowbridge, with an expansion of English medium provision being delivered as part of phase 1 and Welsh medium primary provision being expanded as part of phase 2. And the council considered a range of sites to deliver both phases, with the Cowbridge Comprehensive Site at that time being identified as the preferred site for English medium expansion, which was to be delivered in 2022, and the Darren Farm site for the Welsh medium expansion. The council then consulted on a proposal to increase English medium capacity by establishing a 420 place 3 to 19, or 420 primary place 3 to 19 all through school in the Cowbridge Comprehensive Site, and also the addition of 96 part-time nursery places. The council noted the concerns raised by staff, governors, parents and members of the community, and also local councillors, to the previous proposal, and as such fully explored alternative approaches available to deliver the required capacity, because as we go back, this is all about the additional capacity that we require in primary schools in Cowbridge. The council identified an alternative approach which would meet future demand for English medium primary education, whilst also addressing a number of concerns submitted as part of the consultation exercise. So in March last year, we authorised the Director of Learning Skills to undertake a consultation on the proposal that's before you, on the first stage of that proposal. And as a result of the pandemic, that consultation was extended right through till 23rd of November. But it was also fully considered by the cross-party Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee in October last year as part of the consultation process, and the Cabinet recommendations were endorsed. So on the 21st of December, Cabinet considered the feedback submitted during that consultation, and it determined to progress the proposal through the publication of a statutory notice. That's part of the process that we normally have to adhere to, and that was published on the 13th of January this year, in accordance with the School Standards and Organisation Wales Act 2013, and people had 28 days to object to it. So the council received 92 objections by the end of that 28-day objection period. The objections have been summarised and responded to in the attached objection report for Cabinet to consider. I can't speak now. To consider as part of the decision-making process. The report can be found at Appendix D. The majority of issues raised were addressed within the original consultation report. A lot were very similar, which was considered by Cabinet on the 21st of December last year. So a decision is now required on whether to implement the proposal to increase the number of primary places in Cowbridge from September 2022. And if that decision is taken, a complete procurement exercise has been undertaken, ready to appoint a contractor to design and build the proposed school building for it to happen by that date. So further details, the tender evaluation, are outlined in the Part 2 item that will be considered later in the agenda. But before I go to the recommendations before us today, I just wanted to return to some of the comments received in the original consultation. So in the first consultation on the first proposal, there were a range of views, but mainly people told us that while they wanted a new school, they didn't want their school to get any bigger, and they wanted it to stay in the town centre, or on the town centre site in the heart of their community. So they wanted it where it was, they wanted it to be the same size. We listened, and that's what we're working towards. So that's why this proposal is purely for the additional capacity that we need in primary provision. So we listened, we're working towards that outcome. Sadly, though, to achieve that's a bit more complicated. And so in the interim, we will continue, as we promised to maintain the existing buildings. And on Friday, I was very pleased to sign off £240,000 for maintenance in a Bompvine Primary School. We will stand firm on our commitment to that. So as I said, this report relates purely to a need to expand primary provision in Cowbridge as a result of new housing developments, and therefore the recommendations before you are: one, that Cabinet considers this report, the consultation document, the consultation report, statutory notice, formal objections and objection report. That Cabinet approves implementation of the proposal to make regulated alterations under section 2.3 of the School Organisation Code 2018 by changing the age range of Cowbridge Comprehensive School from 11 to 19 to 3 to 19, increasing the capacity of Cowbridge Comprehensive School from 1,586 places to 1,796 places, to accommodate 210 English medium primary school places, with an additional 48 part-time nursery places, and constructing a new school building on the Cowbridge Comprehensive site to accommodate the primary and nursery places. And thirdly, that subject to approval of recommendations 1 and 2, Cabinet consider the additional recommendations in relation to the design and construction of the new building, which are contained in the Part 2 report later in this agenda. I so move.
Thank you very much. Ben, you'd like to come in, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Liz, for all your comments there. It's, I think, a really detailed report, and absolutely the journey we set out on achieving were these additional places for primary school children across Cowbridge, and I think it was right that you took us through that timeline. And I think it's right that we acknowledge that a lot of these comments, even in the statutory notice about the proposal around the Cowbridge school site, still focus strongly on the Bontvine School. And I mean, the local members have been champions for Bontvine from the very beginning, and were instrumental in conversations we had when we were listening to the community and changing what we were doing. And I think we don't often enough highlight when consultations lead to change. And I think it's worth absolutely underlining that. The problem we have is more places are needed, and I think you very clearly outline how we've responded to what's been said. I think it's important that we show our commitment to all schools that still need improvement across the Vale, and I think it's testament to how impressive the 21st Century School programme has been in providing these new schools that, of course, everybody wants their new school now. And clearly, having had a conversation about Bontvine in terms of the first set of consultations, students, parents, governors, members will be keen to understand that we've not forgotten Bontvine, and I think it's very welcome that we are investing such a significant amount of the repairs fund in work needed to be done at Bontvine. So I certainly welcome that, and I certainly think we need not delay in setting out our plans for Bontvine, but also for all the schools that are still to be dealt with. And I know that parents right across the county borough will be very interested to see what we're working on. But certainly the fact we've achieved so much and we've invested so much in partnership with Welsh Government to 21st Century Schools is not something to be looked past without acknowledgement every time we have these sort of conversations. And the fact that we're delivering for those local economies, the way that we're putting our projects forward, and the manner of the timelines being kept to, I think is testament to how the staff are working right across the 21st Century Schools initiative. So I thank them for that. I welcome this report, but I think it is right that we acknowledge all of the comments that have been made, and we signal to Bontvine and indeed others that we've not forgotten them. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Yeah, I think that's important really, is that we went down a road that we thought was the right way, and then that didn't find favour, so we changed direction, but we haven't lost sight of the fact that we still have issues in terms of Bontvine, and indeed we will deal with those, but we'll now deal with them at a slightly delayed time. So and in the meantime, obviously there's still improvements being carried out anyway. But this is a step forward in terms, and this isn't the first time we've done an 11 to 19 school anyway, so 3 to 19 school, I should say. And I just think it's the right way forward, to be honest, because we have to meet the need. And that's the important part. We have a need to meet and we have to address it. So we can't sort of sit back and say, well, we'll wait another 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We can't do it. We've got to do it now. So I'm happy to go forward, and if Ben hasn't seconded it, I will. So I don't know if anybody else got any comments. So we agreed part of recommendations 1 and 2, and we'll take 3 to the part 2 of the agenda later on, if everybody's accepted that. Yes? Good. Okay, thank you. And as I say, it's a comprehensive report, and all the objections are there within Appendix D2, so they're all there to be read. And they have been addressed. Item 13 is the school admissions arrangement 22-23, and again, Liz, it's yours, I think.
Turning my mic on. Yes, Ben made the comment just now about it's important when we show that consultations actually change things, because everybody says, oh no, consultations, they won't change anything. This is actually a case in point. we brought the consultation on the school admissions arrangements to Cabinet a while back, because the council has a statutory duty to consult on school admission arrangements annually and to determine the arrangements for 2022-2023, following appropriate consultation by no later than the 15th of April 2021. So the purpose of this report is to advise Cabinet of the outcomes of the statutory consultation on the school admission arrangements, as I've just said, for admission to community schools in accordance with the Education Determination of Admission Arrangements Wales Regulations 2006. The council received 165 responses by the closing date of 8th of February, and of the 165 individual responses, 71 consultees were in support of the proposals and 94 were opposed. A summary of the key themes and issues raised during the consultation exercise is included in the consultation report, and that's at Appendix B. But as Cabinet will recall, the key changes proposed as part of this consultation included, for primary arrangements, a permanent change to Ysgol Dewi Sant and Ysgol Llanbarch school catchment areas, and secondly, a temporary change to St Cyrus school catchment area for a period of 3 years commencing 2022-2023 to address a temporary imbalance. Although, if Cabinet recalls, we did express our concerns at the time and agreed to work with schools to see if we could find a solution. A number of key themes were highlighted in favour of and in opposition to the proposal, and they're in paragraph 2.14 and 2.15, and they're also included in the consultation report attached to Appendix B. As part of the consultation, counter proposals were also made by the 3 English medium secondary schools in Barry to work with the council to manage the additional Barry pupils equitably within Barry. Penquitra High School in particular has identified a clear proposal to manage additional pupils over a 3-year period as a way of supporting the school in the longer term, particularly as the numbers begin to decline after 24-25, and it's considered that this would be a more prudent measure. So it's therefore recommended that instead of introducing the dual catchment area for St Cyrus, priority is given to ex-feeder pupils via an amendment to the oversubscription criteria found in Appendix A to access the secondary school of their choice along with their peers. So that would prioritise applications for pupils who reside in Barry but attend primary schools in Penarth and Dinas Powys, and they would be able to transfer to St Cyrus. It will also address concerns expressed by these parents as part of the consultation and alleviate pressure on Barry secondary schools. Along with the consultation report, you'll have found the equality impact assessment is also included at Appendix C. I think it has to be said, when I said about how consultation changes things, that even in the middle of a pandemic, council officers ensured appropriate time was made available to ensure meaningful, relevant and transparent engagement with stakeholders as part of the consultation process. And schools engaged constructively when they had huge pressures on them as well. So I would like to put my thanks on record to them. So the recommendations before us are that Cabinet considers this report, the consultation report and other appendices included as part of this report. Secondly, that Cabinet approves the school admissions policy at Appendix A, including an additional criterion prioritising admission of ex-feeder pupils on roll at a primary school prior to the withdrawal of the feeder system as part of the oversubscription criteria until the end of the academic year 2024-2025, following which it will be removed. So that's a temporary change. And thirdly, that Cabinet approves the proposed changes to Ysgol Dewi Sant and Ysgol Llanbarch school catchment areas for 2022. And if I could add a fourth recommendation, that Cabinet expresses its thanks to council staff, the education, admission staff, and also to constructive engagement on this to find a solution to such a difficult problem. I'd so move.
Thank you. Eddie, you would like to come in? I've got a fifth recommendation, by the way. Eddie.
All right, I was going to second that, but if you've got another recommendation,
I'll do it now. It's easier. Yeah. Can I recommend a fifth recommendation? Is the use of 1414, the urgency procedures, because in order to meet the deadline of the 15th of April, I need to do that. The reason I do that is normally you would go to scrutiny, but scrutiny, if it was called in, would be the 15th of April itself, and the next time the cabinet could consider it would be the 26th of April. So I think we need to use the use of 1414 urgency procedures to meet the deadline. Sorry, Eddie. Right.
Yeah, I support that as well, Leader. Thank you there. Yeah, again, this is another piece of work which is it becomes very emotive, doesn't it? It's dealing with people and their lives and their children, and you know, sometimes there's some unintended consequences, and it's quite a juggle, isn't it, to try and resolve all these issues with, you know, different priorities for different people. I would just like to add that yes, there's been considerable work, and thank you for moving forward with this, because it is something that you know, particularly from the Dewi Sant, we had some individuals from the town couldn't actually get their own children in the local school, and you know, that's contrary to the, you know, they were able to walk from school from Lanta, but they weren't able to, so because of the catchments. So things like this were unintended, and you know, they you know, thankfully through the reports people have been listened to, and we've made some arrangements, and even trying to sort out those arrangements, there's some challenges, but I think we're in a good place, and I really support these recommendations going through. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Somebody else got any comments? I think it's a very comprehensive report, but if you thought I was distracted, what I was doing was checking the diary, because I realised that we got Easter coming up, and that throws things out. So so Liz had recommended a fourth recommendation. I recommended a fifth. Did everybody accepted that? Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. Next item is a proposed events programme for 21-22. Again, Liz, it's yours, I think.
Yeah, just check that my mic's on. Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to update Cabinet of the suggested changes to the Council's event programme running from 2021 to 2022 in view of the coronavirus pandemic. So prior to the coronavirus outbreak, the Council organised and supported quite a diverse programme of events across the Vale of Glamorgan annually. But last year, obviously due to the pandemic and following Welsh Government guidance and legislation, both council events and externally organised events on council land were either cancelled or postponed to this year. But we continue to be in contact with external organisers in relation to the ongoing COVID-19 situation to look at ways ahead. This report recognises the current lockdown and COVID restrictions in place in the Vale of Glamorgan, and makes suggestions for an events programme on the basis of a relaxation and lifting of restrictions during the course of this year, of 2021-22. And it's suggested, therefore, that this year the proposed programme is refocused to deliver smaller scale, safe events that support both the economy of our town centres, the coast and our country parks, by working in partnership with providers and in line with recommendations of Welsh Government. Suggestions that are included in the attached appendix include outdoor events spread out over longer periods of time, such as weeks or months, so as not to cause large gatherings, and taking place in venues across the Vale. In staging events, we would also be hoping to work with many more local businesses and creative businesses, so it could be performers or artists, etc. And it is our intention to hold Meet the Buyer events so that we are able to engage and support our local creative economy as well as our local town centres. Events would obviously require specific approval of the council's senior leadership team and also the event safety advisory group, which includes could be environmental health people, licensing people, police, etc., etc. Appendix A details proposed events with costs, but in the current ever-changing environment, we do need a degree of flexibility, hence the request for delegated powers as suggested. So the recommendations are that Cabinet considers and approves the proposed events for the year 2021-22, which are Appendix A, subject to current legislation in place at that time, and that the head of regeneration planning be granted delegated powers in consultation with the Cabinet member for Education Regeneration to implement changes to the events programme, in particular to respond to the changing environment governed by COVID-19 in future months. I so move.
Thank you. Anybody got any comments, Ben?
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you again, Liz. I think that's a really good overview of how we can use our events programme and the money we invest in events across the county borough to good effect. And I think we all hope that every event on the list of suggested events can happen. I think it will be a great boost to people's mental health and well-being to be able to get out and engage with these events. Stuff like the walking and exploring new parts of the Vale, I think it's really fantastic. And I think even if it hadn't been for COVID and the effects it's had, it would show the events we have previously put on that were mass gathering events have done their job to an extent. They've boosted awareness and visitor numbers to our resorts, particularly to Barry Island, and I think it's right that we promote a further exploration of our wonderful countryside and all of our high streets and towns as well. So yeah, if I didn't already jump in for seconding, I'd happy to second it. And yeah, I think we all hope that all these events can happen. But I think the public understands when things can't. We're all just so excited about the chance that they might happen. So I think it's right that we include all the lists in there, and like I say, we'll keep our fingers collectively crossed.
Indeed, and I think it's worth highlighting paragraph 211 and 212, because clearly throughout the pandemic, the council's been working with the external organisers to reschedule their events, because clearly they weren't going to take place in 2020, and whether or not they can actually take place in 2021 is still up for grabs in some respects, but meetings with organisers are still ongoing, and I think that's important to highlight, that we're still looking to see what we can do as the COVID restrictions are eased, and hopefully people will become vaccinated and the levels of COVID goes down enough for us to be able to do things a little more normally than we are at the moment. Okay, so if everybody's happy with that, we will move on to impressive report, really, in some respect, and I'm really pleased this year is Penarth Older Persons Housing with complex with care complex, and this is obviously to seek approval to facilitate the delivery of Penarth Older Persons Housing with Care Complex in collaboration with the Wales and the West Housing Association. And I think, Margaret, you're going to take this one, please.
Thank you, Leader. I am so pleased this is coming in front of us. It is a good report and it's a good project. The project aims to approve much needed older persons' homes with health facilities as well. It is needed in Penarth, and in this area especially, we have a local letting policy, so it will be for the people of Penarth. So it is a great project. The project is 3.6 acres of vacant council owned land. So it's our own land, and the land is in with the portfolio for housing and services and is part of the adopted local development plan. I can say so much about this. It's been waiting to come for a while, and I think it's going to be a great thing for Penarth. It is working with Wales and the West, and it is with the health part as well. It'll keep the residents in their own homes for much longer, and that's what people want these days. And I can still say that people are really wanting homes like this to be able to stay in their own accommodations until their life is come to the end, and sometimes that's what they need more than anything. I see Liz has put her hand up before I go to recommendations, but there is 7 recommendations. I won't read them all out, but I know Liz wants to come in.
Okay, Liz.
Thank you, Eden, and thank you, Margaret. I can't say how delighted I am at this report. I know it's taken such a long time for it to come forward. Having talked to older people in Penarth, they've looked on in envy at the success of Gwlau Caredig, the extra care facility in Barry, where people can retain independence as they go into their older years. And I think that, you know, as good as Tydewi Sant and Oakwood Court, etc., have been in the care, the types of care they provide, what was missing was that extra care facility. And to be able to put it onto the same site alongside some independent living provision, you know, bungalows or apartments, what they end up being, means that older people in Penarth don't have to be worried about what life holds for them in the future. They know that there is provision in the town where they can live independently or access whatever support they need going forward, all in a super location looking out over the countryside. I mean, I know I was talking to someone the other day and said, can we have some nice paths, please, so that people can access Cosmeston easily from that location. Super location, super facility, and if I can, I would be absolutely delighted to second this report.
Thank you,
Liz.
I know it's for people of Penarth, and as you get older, you do worry that you can't stay in your own area, and so this will bring some relief. So there is 7 recommendations. I'm not going to read them all because they're all quite long. So can I ask for your approval, please?
Indeed you can, and I think it's important because I'm really delighted with this because I brought extra care facilities to the council's attention many years ago, before the one in Barry even, and I remember taking some councillors up to Blackwood where my late sister lived. And the quality of life changed so dramatically when she moved in there at the time, originally with her husband, but who died before her, but she's no longer with us. But her quality of life was so much enhanced by being in an extra care facility, and I just think this is what I've been hoping for such a long time. So I'm really pleased this going forward. And can I thank you for bringing the report, and can I thank the officers for the amount of work that's gone in order to do this. Okay, everybody agreed? Yeah. Okay. Yep. The next item is it's a joint actually it's a joint cabinet report of Cabinet Member of Housing and Building Services and Cabinet Member for Legal, Regulatory and Planning Services in relation to a Gypsy and Traveller site search update. I think Margaret is going to take this to begin with, yes? Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. This report updates Cabinet on the attempts to identify a suitable site to meet the long-term needs for the Gypsy and Travellers in the Vale of Glamorgan. The report has gone a long way. We have gone out to landowners, land agencies, and our own sites we've looked at, and it's been a long time coming that we have to do this. And I know that once we get into getting our site up and running, it'll be for the benefit of the gypsies and travellers themselves. The report sets out the way forward and the council to address the long-term gypsy travellers accommodation needs in the Vale of Glamorgan. And I do know that Eddie will want to say something, but I've got to say that I won't go to the recommendations until Eddie has spoke, because I do want to, there's one in there I just want to make sure you see. So Eddie, I don't know.
Eddie, do you want to come in and make any comment?
Yeah, it's important that I do make some comment, because clearly there's a planning side of this as well, and I'm well aware that we previously, as a council, tried to set a site aside, and there were some difficulties with it, and unfortunately it fell. Years are passing by, and we still haven't progressed this. It's certainly something that, from a legal perspective, and we need to, put something in place for the gypsies and travellers, and recognising it says in the report, isn't it? There are some things that they want different, and that's been discussed with them. So sometimes you have to come up with a compromise, and I think that's what this report is trying to do. We've progressed through certain areas. We've got to a point now where we need to move this forward. It will go back to scrutiny, and they'll have an opportunity to be much wider discussion again, rather than just as cabinet members. A bit like previous reports where we said we consulted, that we can get the extension of other views, so that we're not in a position when we're in a main meeting trying to make a decision, being distracted by certain comments or whatever. It gives, the scrutiny will give people an opportunity to speak. So that's quite important for me. But recognising that as an authority, there is a requirement for us to put something in place, and it's about time we did. Thanks for that.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Well, there's 5 recommendations, and Eddie has mentioned one. It will go to scrutiny, Housing and Safe Homes Scrutiny Committee. So we'll wait for their comments to come back to us. And 5, it's that a future report presented to the cabinet after it's been to scrutiny. So we will wait until for their comments to bring us back to this cabinet.
Yeah, thank you. It's a situation which we've been sitting on for a long time. We had deadlines. It would have been now been extended by Welsh Government, thankfully, by another year because of COVID. We've gone out and explored the market. We've sent for calls. I know I asked the officers to go back out and search land agents and all the rest of it. And clearly we are where we are. This is the suggestion. Goes to the scrutiny committee, and we'll see what develops at the scrutiny committee. And I'm sure there will be comments made there. Okay, the 5 recommendations, as Margaret says, I'm not going to read them all out. And obviously the last one is that the 4th one is that the Strategic Housing Board investigate further permanent use of the land as well. So this will be dealt with now by the Strategic Housing Board. Okay, everybody agreed?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. The next item is objections report to the appropriation of general fund land to the housing revenue account for the purposes of house building. Again, some house building off Pencoitra Lane. Margaret, I think, yes, Margaret, this is yours.
Yeah. This is the land adjoined to Pencoitra High School, and they are not needing that land anymore. So we are looking at building some houses if we can get this through today and planning in the future. But it is a piece right on the edge, and I have taken their comments into consideration. It is not a public path. It is not for people to walk their dogs. It's trees and overgrown, and the trees are not protected and things like that. I know people worry about certain open spaces, but this is an open space that needs to be developed. There is only 2 recommendations, and that is that the cabinet note the report and of the land at having consultation of the objections, and for the reasons contained in this report, approve the land to the housing revenue account.
Okay.
And the objections, as I've said, I've taken them into consideration, but
Yep, and there were 5 objections. They're all listed in the report and all taken taken on board as to whether their objections were reasonable or otherwise. We're noting the objections, but clearly moving forward, and we will after this cabinet meeting agree that the objectors are advised of that decision. As you say, it's a parcel of land off Pencroft Lane within the within the development plan. And indeed is council-owned land as well. So, yep, we can move forward with that. Yes. So we note the objections, but continue onward. Next item is a report which came last time, but deferred by myself in relation to Millwood Bowls Bowling Club lease. It's a supplementary report to the report that was on the 8th of March. And I'll go to Catherine, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as you've said, this is a supplementary report of relation to the one that came on the 8th of March. Cabinet minute is C513 in relation to issuing the lease for the Millwood Bowling Club. We have received further representation, which the monitoring officer is going to run through now. But Leader, I will come back and discuss the recommendations after.
Okay, that's fine. As I said originally, there were some objections came in. And they've been looked at, and I think Debbie, the monitoring officer, is going to speak to them, please.
I will do. Thank you very much, Leader and Councillor McAfee. So just so that there's clarity, we had one objection to the notices, which was received, and the objection is attached to the 8th of March Cabinet report, and officers' comments in response to those objections also set out in the 8th of March Cabinet report, which is linked to today's Cabinet report at paragraph 1.2. So that is before members. For clarification, the deadline for objections set out in the notices was by no later than the 17th of December 2020. And I think that links in with the comment that the leader made at the last meeting about the deadline having already passed. However, prior to the 8th of March Cabinet meeting, further representations were received from the objector dated the 7th and the 8th of March. They're appended to today's supplemental report, and also further, the objector also emailed all Cabinet members on the 19th of March regarding agenda item 18, and as indicated on the 8th of March, it was the wish of Cabinet to defer the matter so that Cabinet could have regard to those further representations. So just taking members through the objections and the further representations. So as I've mentioned, the objections and the comments to the original objections are addressed in the 8th of March report. With regard to the representations in the 7th of March paper and using the objector's notation, point 1, the Bowls Club is accessed via an unnamed road, and we're satisfied in that respect from the Legal Services Department. Point 2, Roman numeral 1, section 270 of the Local Government Act 1972 states that open space referred to in that act, the 1972 Act, has the meaning assigned to it by section 336(1) of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Sorry, it's a bit legalistic, but I'm satisfied that the officers and Councillor Mrs. McAfee has not erred in law on that particular point. Turning to point 2, Roman numeral 2, non-registration of land at the land registry does not mean that you cannot apply or be granted planning permission. I think that's important to highlight. And the council was the owner of the land at the requisite time. so there's no error in that regard. Point 2, Roman numeral 3, there's no requirement for the council to remove a restrictive covenant before granting a lease. The proposed lessees are aware of the 1935 conveyance and its contents. Point 3, Roman numeral 1, the land is now accessed off Pontypridd Road by the adopted highway and then over council owned land. The right of way referenced to in the conveyance is now irrelevant because of that particular situation. Point 3, Roman numeral 2, this point is not relevant to the proposed lease of the land to the bowling club. Forth Cwm Kiddy is an adopted highway. Point 3, Roman numeral 3 has been addressed earlier, and Roman numeral 4, Forth Cwm Kiddy is an adopted highway. Turning to point 4, none of the points raised relate to the land in question, but addressing each in turn. So point 4, Roman numeral 1, the information requested pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act is available from the Land Registry. It is not considered relevant to review the historical background to the adoption of Forth Cwm Kiddy for the purposes of the proposed lease of the land to the bowling club, and Forth Cwm Kiddy, as I've mentioned, is an adopted highway. Point 4, Roman numeral 2, this is a general point which is not relevant to the proposed lease of the land to the bowling club. Point 4, Roman numeral 3, this point does not relate to the land which is the subject of this report and is therefore not relevant for Cabinet's consideration of the report or its consideration whether to proceed to grant the lease of the land to the bowling club. Point 5.1, my guidance is that a decision to grant the lease to the bowling club would not constitute a breach of the members' code of conduct. The lessee is aware of the issues and the covenants on the land, and the land has been used as a bowling club for over 30 years without challenge. Turning to point 5, Roman numeral 2, it is not usual practice to attach all the relevant legal documentation relating to land ownership to Cabinet reports of this nature. And 5, Roman numeral 3, if officers had considered any of the documents relevant for Cabinet to consider in relation to the report over and beyond the advice of officers, this would have been included, or they would have been included, but it's noted the observation regarding listing background papers. So those are my comments with regards to the 7th of March representations. Turning to the 8th of March representations, which are set out in an addendum document attached to today's report. This does not contain any further relevant points in respect of the matter before Cabinet today, which have not been addressed in my comments relating to the 8th of March objections. And then finally, and turning to the objector's email dated the 19th of March, insofar as they relate to the proposals regarding the proposed Millwood Bowling Club lease. At point 2, I've been asked to explain the council's assertion in paragraph 225 that the right-of-way referred to was to subsist until a public roadway from Pontypridd Road was available to access the land, when according to the 1935 conveyance there was no such covenant attached to the strip of land that accessed Reservation 6, and also to explain how the adopted highway referred to could be adopted when there is nothing in the 1935 conveyance that provided for vehicular rights over the strip of land used to access Reservation 6. So in response to that request for an explanation, I'd advise that it's dealt with in my previous response. The right-of-way issue was only of relevance at the point of time that the council was gaining access to the land via the land which remained in the ownership of Samuel Romley. The land which makes up the adopted highway of Forth Cwm Kiddy would have been put up for adoption by the owner of the land. Then turning to point 3, the objector has provided a plan produced by the council in 2009, and this is a plan which has been produced by an officer and refers to noting that the extent of the red hatching being the access does not reach all the way to Pontypridd Road. So in response, my advice is this point is not relevant. The adoption of the highway would have been in the gift of whoever owned the land at the point it was adopted, and the historic rights of way are no longer relevant for the reasons I've outlined previously. And finally, at point 4 of the 19th of March email, reference is made by the objector to land which was developed for residential purposes in the vicinity, but not the land which is proposed to be leased to the Millwood Bowling Club. And these questions of no relevance to the proposed lease of the bowling club, and it's further commented, as mentioned earlier, that the bowling club can be accessed via adopted highway and council land, and no other rights are relied on. So hopefully that does give members some further clarification. I'm conscious there's quite a bit of duplication within that, but felt it was necessary to work through each of the further representations in turn. So to assist Cabinet, I would just reiterate, as per the report, that having considered the objections together with the follow-up objections and officers' comments, that it's my view that there's nothing contained within the objections and the follow-up representations objections that would preclude Cabinet in disposing the land to the Millwood Bowling Club by way of a lease. So I'll hand over to Councillor McCaffer, but it might be just as well just to note within the recommendations that members have had regard to the further representations and also my verbal comments this afternoon. So hopefully that's clear. I'm more than happy to take any questions should there be any need for further clarification.
Thank you so much for that, Debbie. And you're right, it is very complex, but I think that all our members can obviously understand what's going on here now. We do have 4 recommendations that I'd like to propose to Cabinet. First one being that Cabinet notes a supplementary report to the report considered on the 8th of March in respect to the proposal to issue a lease to Millwood Bowls Club, in addition to the further representation received. Recommendation 2, that Cabinet notes the objection to the disposal of the land by way of a lease to Millwood Bowling Club. Having considered the objection for the reasons contained in this report, and considering the officer comments made today, we approve the disposal of the land to Millwood Bowling Club by way of the lease. Recommendation 3, that authority is granted to the monitoring officer, head of legal democratic services, to execute the lease, and that the objector be advised of this decision. So I'd ask Cabinet today to approve this, please.
I'm happy to second it, and as I said, I was happy to, in some respects, to make sure we could deal with this properly. We've deferred it. The objections have been noted. As I said, it wasn't in the original report. It did show that the notices were placed in the Barring district on the 26th of November and the 3rd of December, with representations required by the 17th of December. So I'm happy to second. And if anybody else got any comments, also can I thank Debbie for verbal update, please. Okay. Thank you. Everybody agrees. Good. Next item is Cabinet Member Neighbourhood Services and Transport. It's in relation to the improving strategic transport encompassing corridors from the M4 junction 34 to A48. The well-tagged stage 2+ outline business case. Peter.
Thank you, Leader. I'll, as you've read the title, it's long enough. I'll just talk about it as the report. Just a bit of a long one. Yep. I think it's also fair to say that the study has recently been subject to the completion of a 12-week public consultation, which ran from the 30th September to the 23rd of December 2020, and the output of that consultation has been captured as part of a standalone consultation report, and I would like to thank the many contributors to that work. I'd then go on to say that we've taken this scheme forward in partnership with Welsh Government, given the importance of the St Athan and Cardiff Airport Enterprise Zone to the South Wales economy. And it needs to be remembered that the funding for all the studies undertaken to date has come from the Welsh Government. We appreciate the sensitivities around the scheme and the need to balance a range of issues and impacts, and that is why the studies have been in-depth and the consultation wide-ranging. As part of this process, and as set out in the report, much work and analysis has already been undertaken on the potential environmental impacts of the proposal. We are, however, fully aware of the changing and developing situation as a result of COVID, and also particularly the urgency of climate change agenda. After all, we have received, a little earlier this meeting, an excellent report on Project Zero, the Council's approach to climate change, which sets out the Council's approach to climate change agenda, having declared a climate emergency back in 2019. And it was on this basis that rather than simply progressing to the next stage, we wanted to assess the ongoing relevance and appropriateness of the scheme in the current context. The bid was to consider the implications of COVID on the scheme, and given that we now know people have different travel patterns and the world of work is changing, and also the implications on the climate change agenda and the need to focus on active travel, that bid has been rejected, which is an indication that Welsh Government have already considered that the scheme is no longer as relevant as it was when we embarked upon this project a number of years ago. As a consequence from the recent outcome of the recent outcome from Welsh Government on the WID process, the scheme will no longer be progressed. And so whilst the published document has 2 recommendations, because of that information, I am only moving the one recommendation today, and that is the progress made on the title of the report, containing proposals to enhance highway connectivity between the M4 junction 34 and the A48 at Sycamore Cross is noted. Thank you.
Okay, Ben.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Peter, for your overview. Yeah, I'd join you in paying tribute to the detail of the report and the need for it to have taken the time it's taken. I'd also thank the residents and everybody who took part in the consultation. I of course want to make particular mention of one of the local ward councillors in my group, Councillor Michael Morgan. He's a lifelong resident. He's attended countless community council meetings, gone and had meetings with all members of the community, engaged with these groups, and done that with the grace of understanding that this process was about consulting, not about making statements before we had the facts. At the end of the day, as you've stated, Welsh Government had an approach. We were investigating that with the community, supported by vibrant local people, and the report speaks for itself. Having engaged at all levels with the council as well, I think Councillor Morgan's involvement has been of assistance to how we've been moving through some of our reflections on it, and the fact that an hour and a half into this meeting he's still here to listen and have his testament there. I think the maturity of the report and the detailed and right and proper, and also the fact that we're talking now about an approach by Welsh Government around active travel, I think we are already prepared, and I'm sure there'll be future Cabinet reports that talk about how we're going to make the most of this new approach. And I welcome some surety from Welsh Government talking about a 20-year plus programme around active travel, that their ideas around road building are perhaps gone, but it's for them to clarify that even further, I guess. We will no doubt revisit the topic of Welsh Government changing its tact when it comes to other projects within our county borders. And we already note the clear signal from national government with regards to the M4 relief road. This is about active travel and about seeing through promises to the environment as well. And so I'm on board with anybody who can have a consistent message about that right across the county and the country. And we all need to find ways of encouraging people to get out of their cars. We need to improve the options for people to be able to use public transport. And so I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in transport planning. And I think as we go forwards, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. So I don't think any of this work is wasted, I guess, is what I'm coming around to. And the idea that we have a Councillor McAfee's just left us at the moment. I think that the idea that this is useful work, it absolutely is, and it's right that we were going to put forward the bid as you talked about to understand those impacts, and so yes, I think it can be usefully referred back to in the future, and certainly everybody who's taken part, their contributions are not wasted by any means. And so thank you for that. And I note that we are noting the contents of it. And if it's not already seconded, I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, it's clear from the statement from Welsh Government. This was a Welsh Government backed scheme. We no longer wish to progress. So we note what's happened so far, and no further action will be taken. Yeah. Does anybody else got any comments? The Managing Director wants any comments? Or yeah, go on.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think Councillor King's comments are the most pertinent, really, in that, you know, we did bid for additional money on the back of a changing world, if I can put it that way. We've had COVID for the last 12 months. People's patterns of work have changed. People's travel patterns have changed. We've also got the climate change agenda, which is at the forefront of our minds. Councillor King referred to the report earlier on the agenda, and that has to take relevance. And from my perspective, it's clear that Welsh Government are of that mind as well. They've looked at the scheme, they've looked at that changing dynamic, and considered that they no longer wish to support it moving forward. And that's on the basis that we made that bid as well. We wanted to assess the scheme in that changing environment. So there is very little else to say other than to say that the scheme is no longer supported.
Absolutely, and I think it's important that although we're not taking recommendation 2, it was going to be that should Welsh Government continue to fund the project, etc. Clearly they're not. So we will leave it there. Liz, would I come in, please?
I was just going to comment that it's worth noting that alongside this announcement that came from Welsh Government, there was also an announcement which meant substantial funding for us in terms of sustainable transport, the scale of which we probably haven't seen before. I don't think we understand just how much we've got, because I think other stuff is coming out of the in terms of details, but I think we have to recognise that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's right. Maybe holding back on this one, but in fact other active travel routes are and schemes are moving forward. Okay, good. Well, at least we know where we are. That's the main thing, I think. The next item is, do I have any items that are urgent? In fact, I do. I'd like to bring one report. It's an expression in relation to an expression of interest regarding Aberthaw Power Station site and the UK government's STEP Power Station programme. As a requirement, they've sent out a request for anybody who's got any suggested sites. It has to be in shortly. Therefore, it's urgent, and it's a report from the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration. So over to you, Liz.
Is there anything left to say?
No.
In effect, in October, it was the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy announced £220 million funding towards the conceptual design of a fusion power station. And STEP stands for Spherical Tokamak for Energy Production. So I have no idea what that means, but it's an innovative plan for a commercially viable fusion power station, offering the realistic prospect of constructing a power plant by 2040. So in November last year, the UK government invited expressions of interest to identify sites in the UK, and this report is to seek Cabinet's endorsement for the expression of interest for the Aberthaw site to be considered as a site for the STEP power station. I think there's an awful lot of information in the background in terms of what a fusion plant is and how it might fit, etc. But at this stage, it's purely for us to agree to put in an expression of interest, because if you're not in it, you can't be considered regardless. So the recommendations before us are that Cabinet endorses in principle the submission of the expression of interest for the Aberthaw site as one of the 2 sites in Wales to the STEP programme, and secondly, that because it's got to be in quickly, that the urgent decision procedure set out in section 1414 of the Council's Constitution in respect of recommendation 1 be approved in order to meet the deadline for submission of the 31st of March 2021. So moved.
Okay. That's good. And perhaps we could, thinking about it, have a third report saying that we will get a report back to Cabinet on any developments that come forward, so that at least we will have some feedback should there be feedback, because let's be honest, this is an expression of interest, nothing more. Yeah. Okay. And as you say, it has to be agreed by the 31st of March. So we're using the urgency procedure. Okay. Everybody happy with that? And clearly, as far as Aberthaw site is concerned, because it's near the grid, it's actually attached to the grid, so it's an obvious site. I have no other items that I consider that urgent, but I do have some Part 2 items. In fact, one Part 2 item in relation to the increased number for primary school places in Cowbridge. As these matters are considered, there's some confidential issues in it, and issues that we need to move into private session, where confidential matters can be discussed under Part 2. Therefore, I will ask the Cabinet Officer to stop the recording of this open session and ensure that no members of the public are present after this juncture, and only allow the relevant parties to remain to hear the details of the items to be discussed. And following the meeting, the outcome of the Part 2 discussions will be formally captured as part of the minutes of the meeting, advising all parties of the final decision of the Cabinet for this Part 2 item. So
I move Part 2, please.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm glad you did that. So we will be now ending the open session, and we'll come back to Part 2 to consider the other options. So thank you for your attendance. I apologise that my voice wasn't good and somebody came to the door, but that's the trouble of being at home when you're doing these things, and children come home too. Thank you for your attendance and your forbearance.